I never thought the man I married would become the architect of my slow demise, nor that my sister-in-law would be his accomplice. But after months of unexplained sickness, lost opportunities, and a coffee cup that smelled just a little too metallic, I stopped questioning my sanity and started questioning them. What I uncovered wasn't just betrayal, it was attempted murder, disguised as love. And I was done playing the victim. The clink of fine china echoed through the sunlit dining room, followed by a soft murmur of laughter. Outside, the spring morning in Nashville glowed with a deceptive serenity, but inside Nina Anderson's perfectly manicured home, something darker simmered just beneath the surface. I wrapped both hands around the delicate coffee cup in front of me, but the warmth did nothing to chase the chill crawling up my spine. "Don't you want to try the coffee I made especially for you, honey?" James's voice was low, coaxing, but the smile on his face didn't reach his eyes. I blinked, forcing a smile. "That's so thoughtful of you." My tone was even, but my mind was racing. I was Christina Bennett, 229, a rising star in corporate marketing, and lately, a frequent visitor to hospital rooms. 3 years ago, I married James Bennett, a man who once made me laugh so hard my ribs hurt. Now I barely recognized the man watching me with such careful calculation. Beside him sat his sister, Nina, poised and elegant as ever in a silk blouse and soft pearls. She stirred her untouched coffee slowly, her expression unreadable except for the faintest smirk tugging at the corner of her lips. "James has become quite the barista lately," Nina said, her voice honeyed with amusement. "He's been practicing different brewing methods just for you." The emphasis on "you" wasn't lost on me. It slithered under my skin, leaving goosebumps in its wake. The smell rising from the cup in front of me wasn't coffee, not the kind I knew. It had a sharp, almost metallic undertone that made my stomach churn. I glanced around the table. French toast, fruit platters, sparkling juice, the usual setup for our monthly family brunch. Nothing outwardly dangerous. Nothing anyone would question. But then again, nothing had ever seemed wrong on the surface, not even the last 3 times I'd ended up in the ER. I smiled tightly and lifted the cup not to drink, but to stall. Smells unique." James leaned in slightly. "Used a new grind this time. Ethiopian beans. Organic." His eyes flicked to Nina, who raised her coffee to her lips, but didn't drink. Just watched, waited. I'd seen this before. Last month, tea at Nina's house, the taste was strange. 10 hours later, I was curled up in urgent care, vomiting. Doctors called it food poisoning. James said it must have been from the sushi I ate earlier. 2 months before that, breakfast here, pancakes. Harmless, right? Until my vision blurred at work and I collapsed outside a client meeting. James drove me to the hospital himself, at that time, held my hand, looked worried. But he always had excuses. "You're stressed. Maybe it was old vitamins. You probably skipped lunch the day before." And Nina always smiled sweetly and offered to cook next time to help. I'd almost started to believe I was going crazy. Almost, but today, I was done doubting myself. I set the cup down carefully and reached for my phone, pretending to check an email. "Would you mind if I took this into your study, Nina? Quick, work call." She arched a perfectly shaped brow. "Of course, darling, just don't spill anything." As I stood, I stumbled just enough to cause a scene. My hand knocked against her cup. "Oh no," I gasped, catching it just before it tipped. In the flurry of napkins and apologies, I switched our cups. Swift, invisible. Nina barely blinked. "Just try not to break anything." I nodded, heart hammering. "I'll be right back." Inside the study, I hovered near the door, cracked just enough to see. My original cup sat on the table, now in front of Nina. James typed something on his phone. Nina lifted the cup to her lips and took a sip. I didn't breathe. Seconds ticked by. Another sip. Then, a flicker, her hand trembled. Just slightly. She paused, blinked rapidly. Her expression shifted. "James," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something's wrong." James looked up. "What?" Her face turned ashen. She set the cup down. "I don't feel..." She tried to stand and stumbled. James leaped to his feet. "Nina." I stepped out of the study, phone recording in hand. "Problem with the coffee." Nina clutched the table, her nails scraping against the wood. "You switched them." James's mouth dropped open. "That wasn't no Nina. That wasn't your cup." The air in the room tightened like a noose. "Call an ambulance," Nina rasped, sliding to the floor. "Please, I can't." I stepped forward, Phone steady. Already on it. The ambulance was pulling into the driveway. Nina lay on the floor, her body racked with tremors. James knelt beside her, white as a sheet. That wasn't supposed to be your cup, he kept whispering. It wasn't meant for me, I said. How thoughtful. Nina's eyes were glassy, her mouth barely moving. It was just supposed to make you sick. The board meeting. We needed you out of the way. Board meeting, of course. I was scheduled to present to Henderson & Co. next week, a deal worth 7 figures. One of Nina's firms had been chasing for a year. A deal I was leading. She was outperforming me, Nina whispered, her voice slurred. You kept landing the accounts. We just wanted to derail you. James's voice cracked. It was her idea. She said a little food poisoning would slow you down. I turned toward the paramedics as they burst in. She drank coffee with a metallic scent and is suffering from tremors. My name's Christina Bennett. Please record that and keep this recording safe. I slipped the phone into a sealed envelope and handed it to the lead EMT. One of the paramedics looked at James. You said you made the coffee. His mouth opened, then closed. I met his eyes. You were willing to poison your own wife to keep me from succeeding. Nina was stabilized, but the doctors were concerned. Unidentifiable toxins. Signs of prolonged exposure. I stood outside her hospital room, watching her through the glass, pale, hooked up to machines. Her voice, the one that once ordered martinis and fake compliments with ease, now rasped like dry leaves. Dr. Phillips, the attending, approached. Mrs. Bennett, I've reviewed your medical records. This isn't the first time. No, I said quietly. I'd like to do some comparisons, blood work, hair samples. We need to determine how long you've been exposed and to what. Behind me, James appeared. Christina, please, he began. I pulled out a second phone, the one I used only for recording. Don't say another word unless your lawyer is present. The hallway outside Nina's hospital room was quiet, unnervingly so, as though the entire floor were holding its breath. I stood still, my pulse steady despite the hurricane inside me. James hovered a few feet away, pale and trembling, his hands opening and closing at his sides. Christina, he whispered, just give me a minute. I can explain. Explain what? I interrupted, my voice low and ice-edged. How you poisoned me repeatedly and then watched me writhe in pain, whispering sweet nothings while tracking my symptoms. His jaw clenched. It wasn't like that. No. I pulled out my backup phone. Let's listen to Nina, shall we? Just needed to knock her out for a few days, make her miss a presentation. You said it wouldn't be traced. That sound familiar? James's face twisted. She pushed for this. Nina said it was the only way to level the playing field. You were taking everything. I was working for everything. I snapped, voice sharp enough to cut through the sterile air. Maybe try that sometime, instead of sabotaging the woman you vowed to love and protect. Behind the glass wall of room 412, Nina stirred slightly. Her eyes opened for a moment, unfocused and frightened. A nurse stepped out and nodded to me. She's awake. The doctor will speak with you shortly. I nodded in return, my focus shifting back to James. Where did you get it? He looked confused. The chemical. I stepped closer. What did you put in that coffee? James opened his mouth but stopped as Dr. Phillips returned. Flanked by a security guard and a tall, sharp-eyed woman in a dark blazer. The woman extended a hand. Detective Elena Mendoza, Metro Police, she said. I understand you've been recording conversations and logging incidents over the past several months. I handed her the envelope with the thumb drive and a printed summary I'd compiled. Audio files, time-stamped, logs, symptoms, text messages. I also have backup files stored off-site. James flinched at the word text messages. Detective Mendoza didn't flinch at all. Dr. Phillips turned to her. We've already run preliminary toxicology. The compound is rare. Used in pharmaceutical testing, not commercially available. Definitely not a household substance. Mendoza's expression hardened. Mr. Bennett, where did you get it? James's eyes darted to me, then to the security guard. I want a lawyer, of course, Mendoza said coolly, signaling the guard. Escort him to a waiting area. We'll take his statement when his attorney arrives. And secure his phone. As James was led away, I felt the first flicker of real relief. like the door had cracked open, and the air was finally moving again. Nina looked up at me, her face hollow and tired. "You switched the cups," she said softly. "I had to know." She closed her eyes. "I didn't want to kill you." "You nearly did." Silence. "I built my career from scratch," she whispered. "You don't know what it's like being passed over for the younger, shinier version of yourself." I stepped closer. "I respected you, admired you, even. I never asked to compete. You made this a war. You took my clients." She hissed, a flash of her old venom returning. "I earned them." Dr. Phillips entered with a tablet. "The compound found in your system matches traces from Mrs. Bennett's past hospitalizations. Christina, we'll be drawing new samples to determine any long-term effects." I nodded. "Do whatever's necessary." "Detective Mendoza is requesting a full warrant for both of their homes," the doctor added. "We also contacted the pharmaceutical company. One of James's college friends works in their R&D lab. They're cooperating with the investigation." "Anything else I can give you?" "I will," I said firmly. "And I want to press charges, all of them." Nina's gaze didn't waver this time. "You really are relentless. Survival requires it." The silence of my apartment was unfamiliar. It had been months since I'd felt this kind of quiet, a quiet not built on suspicion, illness, or lies. I set down my bag and walked to the window, staring out over Nashville's shimmering skyline. My reflection in the glass looked different. Older, maybe. Wiser, angrier. My phone buzzed. "Unknown number, Ms. Bennett. This is Ada Ross. We've reviewed your recordings and logs. We'd like to schedule a meeting." "This is bigger than a family dispute." I took a deep breath. Of course it was. A table full of evidence spread before me. Photos of the bottles retrieved from James's desk. Their labels eerily clinical. Internal. Emails between Nina and James, carefully decrypted. The audio file where James said, "This batch should knock her out longer." The assistant district attorney looked at me across the table. They weren't just trying to sabotage a career. They were documenting chemical testing without authorization, using a live subject. You. This is criminal abuse. And it borders on attempted homicide. I clenched my jaw. "I want them prosecuted. Fully. You'll have to testify." "I will. Some of this may go public." "I don't care." I looked at the photos again. My handwriting in the hospital logs. The texts. James's email with dosage notes labeled with my initials. They'd treated me like an experiment. A problem to solve. A threat to neutralize. But I wasn't the one who needed neutralizing anymore. James held my hand under the warm Tennessee sun. His smile wide, his promises endless. "I'll always protect you," he'd said that day. No matter what. I should have listened more carefully to the silence between those words. Because sometimes protection is just another control word, and love. It becomes poison when filtered through envy. The courtroom was colder than I expected. The air was sterile, thick with whispers and rustling papers, punctuated by the occasional snap of a gavel or the scrawl of a stenographer's pen. The polished wood panels gleamed under fluorescent lights. But nothing could scrub the rot from what was about to be uncovered. I sat quietly at the witness table, my palms flat, a stack of documentation and audio files at my side. My lawyer, Kara Hensley, leaned over and whispered, "Are you ready?" I nodded. Yes, I was. The office was functional and bare, save for the corkboard lined with case files. Nina's photo was clipped in the center, surrounded by threads and pins that mapped her descent from respected executive to criminal conspirator. Detective Mendoza turned the volume up on one of my recordings. "James, she wasn't supposed to be this resilient. It's like nothing keeps her down. I'll increase the dose. Just enough to keep her bedridden through the presentation. That's all we need." The detective hit pause. "Intent is clear," she said, eyes sharp. "The judge won't have trouble seeing that." I pointed to the labeled calendar in my notebook. That week, I was hospitalized. Lost the Brightbridge account because I missed the third pitch meeting. Mendoza made a note. 3 attempted poisonings. Multiple clients lost. Career sabotage. Emotional distress. We're going after them for felony conspiracy, unlawful use of controlled substances, and attempted homicide. I swallowed the knot in my throat. And emotional abuse. Her expression softened. "We'll push for it under coercive control. Family court may take it more seriously than criminal court, but we're laying the groundwork." James looked thinner, grayer. He sat with his hands in his lap, wrists exposed from where his sleeves were rolled, as if begging for sympathy. Nina, beside him, looked like a shell of herself, no longer poised and polished, just drawn and exhausted. The prosecution's voice rang through the chamber. The defendants deliberately introduced chemical agents into the victim's food and drink with the intent to incapacitate her during key professional moments. This wasn't a lapse in judgment, it was a sustained and calculated attack. When it was my turn, I walked to the witness stand, shoulders squared, and took my oath. Kara guided me through the testimony, the meals, the illnesses, the EL visits, the gaslighting, the recordings. Then she asked, "What changed for you that day at brunch?" I looked directly at the jury. I stopped doubting myself. My voice didn't waver. I'd spent months thinking I was crazy, that I was overworked or unlucky. But there was a pattern. And on that day, I saw it for what it was. The cup, the glances, the way Nina didn't touch hers until I did. It wasn't an accident, it was a test. One I wasn't supposed to pass. James came home late. I was seated at the kitchen island, working on a client brief. "You're still at it?" he said, dropping his keys. I smiled. "The Johnson proposal is huge. If I land this, it'll mean a bonus." He kissed the top of my head. "You're going to burn out." "I'm fine." He poured me tea. I sipped it, and hours later, I was vomiting. That night had stayed with me. Not because of the sickness, but because he seemed almost relieved that I couldn't work the next day. Back then, I called it caring. Now I saw it for what it was. Sabotage in a coffee mug. James's attorney tried to poke holes. "Mrs. Bennett, isn't it possible you're misinterpreting the events? That these illnesses were coincidental?" I didn't flinch. Coincidence doesn't write text messages with instructions. Coincidence doesn't keep dosage logs in a locked drawer. He tried again. "You were married. Is it not possible James was simply concerned and confused about your health?" I looked toward James. If he was concerned, why didn't he stop Nina? Why did he keep helping her? Why did he text? "This batch should keep her down longer." Silence. My voice lowered. "Love doesn't look like this." I stepped outside for air. The hallway buzzed with low murmurs, reporters, and camera crews. Somehow, the media had gotten wind of the case. They called it the poisoned pitch, a marketing rivalry gone murderous. I hated the attention, but I knew the exposure was helping others come forward. A woman approached me near the vending machines. "You don't know me," she said. "But I worked with Nina. She did something similar to me 5 years ago. Not poisoning, but sabotage. I was pregnant and she made sure I got demoted while on leave. You're doing what I never could." Her words lingered with me long after she left. I poured myself a glass of red wine and stood at the window. Below, Nashville glowed golden, unaware of the storm passing above it. There was a time James stood at this window with me. Whispered plans. About kids. About a house with a garden. We had talked about Italy. About Tuscany. None of it was real. I wasn't mourning him anymore, I was mourning the idea of him. The man I fell in love with had never truly existed. He was a mask worn by someone who wanted to dull my shine. I wouldn't let him. The prosecution brought in the pharmaceutical company's security director. He confirmed that James had used credentials from a college friend to access restricted substances under the guise of personal research. The director's voice was grave. "Those chemicals are not safe for human ingestion. One of the compounds, when administered regularly in low doses, can cause chronic gastrointestinal distress and psychological confusion. In high doses, he didn't need to finish." The jury got the message. When Nina took the stand, she tried to backpedal. "I was under stress. James said it was temporary." But the jury didn't buy it, neither did the judge. I held my breath as the foreman stood. "We, the jury, find both defendants guilty of attempted murder, conspiracy to commit bodily harm, and unauthorized use of controlled substances." I didn't cry, I just exhaled. Like I'd been holding my breath for 3 years and was finally allowed to breathe again. "Christina," my new client liaison said, shaking my hand, "your composure during this whole ordeal was admirable. We're honored to extend your contract." As I sat down at the sleek boardroom table, a strange warmth filled me, not pride. Not pride, not vengeance. Closure. The chandeliers above glittered like stars in a too perfect sky. Crystal flutes of champagne clinked, laughter, suits, evening gowns. It was the city's elite at their polished best? I stood near the stage, waiting to be introduced. The host's voice echoed from the podium. And now, the 2025 Excellence in Leadership Award goes to Christina Bennett, a woman whose integrity and strength have redefined resilience. Applause. I stepped forward, heels steady on the marble floor. I didn't blink at the spotlights or the cameras flashing. I didn't flinch at the 100 eyes on me. Because I had nothing left to fear. The courtroom was cold, as always. The verdict had been read, but the sentencing would give final closure. James sat like a broken man. No suit this time, just a plain gray jumpsuit. His once carefully styled hair hung flat. He avoided my eyes. Nina looked worse, thinner, worn down. Her lawyer whispered frantically to her, but she just nodded in mechanical motions, as if she'd already given up. The judge's voice was firm. For the crime of attempted murder by means of sustained poisoning, conspiracy, and unlawful possession of controlled substances, this court sentences James Bennett to 15 years in state prison without parole. James's head sank to his chest. For Nina Anderson, 12 years. With eligibility for parole after 9, due to your cooperation and medical condition. Nina turned toward me then. Her eyes searched my face, desperate, hollow, maybe hoping for a shred of sympathy. There was none. When they were let out in handcuffs, I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I didn't even watch them go. I was already looking forward. I stared at the ceiling of my therapist's office, her voice gentle but pointed. Christina, have you forgiven yourself? For what? I asked. For not seeing it sooner. For not leaving. For trusting them. I swallowed hard. Forgiveness feels like something I haven't earned yet. I survived. Yes. But sometimes I wonder how close I came to not. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means setting the weight down. That's how you move forward. I stepped up to the microphone, the award in my hand. Thank you, I began, the crowd quieting. This past year taught me a lesson I never expected, that the people closest to us can become our greatest threat, and that survival sometimes looks like speaking up, even when your voice shakes. People nodded. A few wiped their eyes. There's strength in boundaries. In truth, in trusting your instincts. And most of all, in not letting darkness dim your light. Applause again, but what I felt wasn't pride, it was release. The hotel terrace overlooked the river. City lights reflecting off the gentle current. I stood alone, sipping ginger tea instead of champagne. Safer, familiar. Quite the speech, a voice said behind me. I turned. Liam Harris. He was a senior partner at a neighboring firm, and the man who'd taken over the Johnson account after I was hospitalized. The only one who didn't try to poach my clients when I returned. In fact, he'd helped me get several back. You're a better speaker than me, he added, smiling. You're a better negotiator than me, I replied. We both laughed. Soft, genuine, the kind I hadn't had in a long time. He stepped beside me at the railing. You look lighter. I feel lighter. We stood in silence for a moment. I didn't think I'd trust anyone again, I admitted. Not in business, not in anything. You don't have to trust everyone, he said. Just start with one. I looked at him, not just his smile, but his eyes. Honest, safe, familiar in a good way. Starting small, I said, like coffee, with no mystery ingredients. He laughed. Deal. I already ordered for you, Liam said as I walked in. I raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? He grinned and slid the cup across the table. I took a cautious sip. Hazelnut, oat milk, light foam. Exactly how I liked it. Okay, I said. You're off to a good start. Trust is earned, he replied, tapping his cup to mine. One sip at a time. I stood outside the old house, the one James and I once lived in. The bank had foreclosed. The lawn was overgrown, windows boarded up. I didn't come to gloat. I came to end the chapter. I placed a single white lily at the gate. Not for him, not for her, for the version of me who lived here once, scared, gaslit, doubting herself. She made it, I whispered. Then, I walked away. The poison never won. The betrayal never broke me. And the story didn't end with suffering. It ended with strength. And love that wasn't laced with lies.